from painted silks to whispered scandals. Discover the untold story of what it was really like to be a courtesan behind the lantern-lit walls of Edo Japan's Welcome to the pleasure quarters. They called it the floating world, a place suspended between desire and despair, elegance and exploitation. Behind the lacquered gates of Yoshiwara, where cherry blossoms never seemed to fall and every glance could cost a fortune, lived women so skilled in seduction and art that even emperors whispered their names. But beneath the rouge and silks was another truth, one few dared to speak. This is the tale of Akiko, sold into pleasure, trained in performance, and poised to outwit a system designed to consume her. History rarely records the inner lives of these women, but if kimonos could talk, and if hairpins held secrets, Akiko's story would be one worth hearing. Just don't expect it to end the way you think. Sold for silk and rice. Akiko was 12 when the knock came. Her father hadn't looked her in the eyes for a week. Her mother had stopped singing. The fields had dried up, and so had the sympathy of the neighbors. "She has good teeth," said the recruiter, lifting Akiko's chin with a practiced hand. That was the last day she saw the plum tree by the kitchen door. When she arrived at Yoshiwara, Edo's most notorious pleasure district, she was dazzled and disoriented. The great gate loomed before her like a gateway to another realm. Lanterns swung above crowds of rowdy samurai, scheming merchants, and smirking dandies. Geisha music drifted through the air like perfume. But Akiko didn't belong here yet. She was a kamuro, a servant to the stars of this strange, seductive stage. They took her name and gave her a new one, Komeko, meaning little truth, and in a place like this, the truth was always little. Then, just as she adjusted to her new life of scrubbing lacquer trays and memorizing poetry, she heard a scream from the sleeping quarters. Kimono wars and hairpin politics. Turns out the scream was from another kamuro who had tried to sneak psych from a client's leftovers and got caught. The punishment: cleaning the public toilet buckets for a month. Akiko learned quickly, beauty could protect you, but wit was your armor. She observed everything. How the top-ranking oiran courtesans barely blinked but somehow seduced entire rooms. How their words danced between compliments and cruel taunts. How their laughter could silence even a samurai's threats. They wore hair so tall it needed wooden supports to sleep, and kimonos so heavy they walked in slow, floating steps, each one rehearsed for maximum hypnotic effect. Akiko wanted it, but promotion was part performance, part politics. You needed talent, sure, but also allies, luck, and a client list that paid in gold and didn't smell like pickled radish. By age 15, Akiko became a shinzo, an apprentice. She painted her face white. She learned how to refuse a gift without causing offense. She studied how to cry on cue, laugh without crinkling her eyeliner, and sip tea like it was a scandal. And then came the letter. She had been summoned by a daimyo, but was it a blessing, or a trap in brocade? Of fans, flesh, and fortune. The room was full of incense and judgments. The daimyo reclined on silk cushions, his attendants silent and staring. Akiko entered like she had seen the oiran do it, slow, elegant, deliberate. She performed a fan dance meant to evoke longing, then played the shamisen with fingers that barely trembled. Then came the real test, conversation. She quoted the tale of Genji. She complimented the man's houri without sounding desperate. She even made a joke about taxation that earned a rare chuckle. The daimyo's eyes lingered. A red fan was offered a silent cue. That night, she lay beside him under a brocade quilt worth more than her village's annual harvest. She imagined freedom with every sigh. She also imagined infections, pregnancy, and the cold slap of a madam tallying up debts. Because here's the truth, courtesans didn't own their lives. They rented them. Even if a client adored you, his coin went to the house. Your costumes were rented, your food deducted, your so-called salary, a joke wrapped in silk. But Akiko was no fool. She began setting aside coins in a hairpin case. Then, one winter morning, the top oiran fell ill, and a new star was needed. The floating world rises. Akiko, now 19 and called Akiko again, had risen faster than most. She was dubbed Hananoka's wind among flowers. She had her own kamuro, her own shamisen, her own suite, and a growing list of patrons with more ambition than discretion. She charged 3 times the going rate. Men wrote poems about her. Women copied her hairstyles. Other courtesans hated her. But she had power, and that was rarer than gold. Yet her heart was a mess. One client, an idealistic scholar, spoke to her like an equal. He read her bashu and brought her persitness. She felt herself softening. Then she found out he was engaged to the daughter of a government official who would outlaw Yoshiwara if he could. She laughed bitterly for a week. She doubled her rates and swore off romance. But something had changed. The act was wearing thin. She no longer flinched at fake sobs or praised cologne-drenched old men. She began eyeing the exit. And then a new merchant arrived, one who didn't ask for her, but for her freedom. The cost of leaving. The merchant's offer was real: a clean house in Kyoto, servants, her own tea room. He would pay off her debt in full. He had no wife, no heirs, no taste for painted dolls, but he saw something in her, a mind, a match. Akiko didn't know what to think. Her madam wept, mostly for lost profits. The other courtesans threw her a farewell party, part jealous, part relieved. Her kamuro clung to her sleeve, and Akiko. She packed slowly, touching each silk robe one last time, unpinning each hair ornament with care. She thought of the dead girl who had screamed years ago. She thought of the scholar, the daimyo, the endless nights of painted lies and strategic moans. And then she walked out, past the lanterns, past the guards, past the plum tree she planted herself behind the brothel kitchen. The real ending. They say she never married the merchant, that she opened a tea house instead, one where only poetry was served and only women could perform, that sometimes samurai would visit just to see if the infamous Hananokaze would recite a haiku. She usually did. Her favorite. The floating world drifts, but I built my raft of words. Let the tide envy. History forgot Akiko, but the floating world, it remembered, and perhaps, so will you. Historical notes for the curious. Yoshiwara was the licensed red light district of Edo, modern-day Tokyo. Established in 1617, women sold into it often started as child attendants kamuro before becoming full courtesans, unjo, or elite oiran. Oiran were cultural icons, trained in the arts, music, calligraphy, and etiquette, unlike geisha, who primarily focused on entertainment and were often forbidden from sex work. Escaping Yoshiwara required buying out one's indenture, which could cost more than a family's lifetime earnings. The Jikonji Temple in Tokyo still houses the memorial of thousands of courtesans who died unnamed. Hit like or subscribe.